You're tuning in to Luminal on the Wall. Welcome. I'm your host, Becky, and joining me always is my co-host and beautiful sister, Bevy.
In our podcast, we will take a deep dive into the evil side of humanity. We will talk about suspicious deaths, shoddy investigations, and all the gory details in between.
But be warned, we will not hesitate to call BS when we hear it, which means you may not always agree with us, but we promise to lay out the evidence so you can come to your own conclusions based on what is presented.
Listener's discretion is advised.
Hey, Bevy.
Hey, Becky.
How's it going?
Good.
Good?
Yeah, super good. What about you?
Oh, it's going pretty well.
Nice.
How's your weekend?
Epic.
Yurting it up?
Yeah, I went to a shanty yurt in Bragg Creek with some girls. It was cool, to say the least.
Yeah, it looks super duper cool, super bright, everything inside.
Bohemian as fuck.
Yeah, it sure looked like it.
Yeah, it was super nice.
You ready to get into it today, Bev?
Yes.
I have a pretty controversial story for you.
Okay.
In fact, it involves 50 Cent and T.I. and Kim Kardashian.
Are you fucking with me?
A little bit.
Okay, I'm like, what?
However, the case did get so much attention that a bunch of celebrities did make tweets about it and post because it's that controversial. You're getting an earful today.
Okay, let's go.
All right, the sources for this case are Wikipedia, RollingStones.com, Uncovered.com, Change.org, 11alive.com, ChillingCrimes.com, and the Morbid podcast.
Sweet.
This case is about Tamla Horsford, a mother of 5 who died at an all-white party, and because of the compromised investigation, we don't really know what happened. But it's interesting and makes you think nonetheless. Bev, this case takes place in the town of Cumming, Georgia. Cumming has a very controversial history due to its racial conflict. In fact, in 1912, there were several rapes of young white women, allegedly by African-American men.
Allegedly. Okay.
September 8th, 1912, a young woman named May Crow was assaulted, and she ended up passing away about 2 weeks after that assault.
So it's basically a murder.
Yeah. Now, 2 days after that attack, Rob Edwards, a black male, was indicted for the rape of May Crow. Edwards was shot, dragged from the Cumming jail, and hung up on the telephone pole at the intersection of Main Street and Tribble Gap Road.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Even worse, the whole town was there to watch it. That incident led to a month-long barrage of attacks on all African-American citizens in Cumming. Governor Joseph M. Brown declared martial law and sent 4 companies of state militia to Cumming to prevent the riots. When martial law is in effect, the military commander of an area or country is given unlimited authority to make and enforce the laws.
So obviously it was out of hand, like black males or people, citizens were getting
attacked. There were riots, just a lot of unrest in that town. Even though the governor had declared martial law, it actually did little to stop the attacks on the African-American citizens.
That's wild to think that a military militia
couldn't even stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, all the black citizens were banished from Cumming.
How?
Unfortunately, these people, they were forced to leave their homes. Many were given the opportunity to sell their property at a super low rate. So they were going to, not get their fortune back, right? If they refused, however, they were told that they would get shot. So virtually
they're forced out of the town.
Yeah, it's like, or sell my house and stay alive,
or get shot
and die. So eventually, all the black folks were run out of town. And Cumming actually kept their town all white from that point on. However, in 1987, racial tensions would flare up again when a group of Black people were assaulted while camping at a park on Lake Lanier. It was widely reported by local newspapers in Atlanta, Georgia, so a lot of attention was brought to that. Because of this, a local businessman decided to hold a peace march. Civil rights leader Reverend Jose Williams joined in on the march through Forsyth County and through the city of Cumming. However, they were assaulted by white supremacists and met with a ton of resistance.
Holy fuck.
Because they were met with this resistance from the white supremacists, the marchers retreated but vowed to return at some point. So on January 24th, 1987, another racially mixed group returned to Forsyth County to complete the march.
I'm happy they went back and did complete it.
Yeah, exactly. They were on a mission. They had to finish that march. On a plus side, though, a group of the National Guard kept everything in order because there was an estimated 20,000 marchers.
I'm glad they were able to keep it in order.
Oh my gosh, right? Could you imagine you're trying to peacefully protest and then it just goes into another absurd
racial assault, riot, crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm happy it went well.
Nowadays, Cumming and Forsyth County have definitely diversified and shown growth. However, there's still said to be a racial tension in its dominantly white county. Which leads us to...
the story?
Yes, the story about Tamla Horsford. This beautiful woman was born in the Caribbean in 1978, and in 1989, she and her family had moved to the Bronx. Tamla met her husband, Leander, in Florida, who had a daughter from a previous relationship. It's said that Tamla treated her as her own. The couple went on to get married and have 5 sons together. When Tamla died, her youngest son was only 4 years old.
No.
Oh no, so young.
That's so sad.
Isn't it? Tamla was said to be very outgoing. She was kind. She wanted everyone to feel loved. She herself loved to laugh, dance. She was described as life of the party. She also lived for her children, and she was a magnificent mother. Tamla and Leander had moved to Cumming 5.5 years earlier. They went there for Leander's work. Everyone said they were such a great couple. They truly were in love and just a beautiful family. On November 3rd, 2018, Tamla had been invited to Jean Meyer's birthday party. Tamla had met Jean Myers through their children's football league, which they both attended frequently. Jean was turning 45, and her friend Stacy Smith had planned a birthday party for her. They invited Tamla. It was a ladies-only slumber party. So on November 3rd, Tamla made her way over to the sleepover and got there around 8:30 p.m. There was 11 other women at that party. Tamla was a little late to the party. She wanted to make sure everything at her house was taken care of for her family. Kids are in bed, dinner was made, things are ready to go for the morning. So as you can see, just a super reliable mom, just wanted her family to be taken care of. So even though this was an all-girls party, Jose Barrera, who was Jean's boyfriend, and another man named Tom Smith, Stacy's husband.
Their husbands were also at this all-girls party?
Yes.
Why?
Initially, they were supposed to have gone out, gotten drinks or food or something. However, they just didn't feel like going out, but they promised to stay in the basement. So when Tamla arrived at this party, she had bought a bottle of tequila for Jean as a birthday present.
How nice.
I would be pumped with a bottle of tequila.
Fuck yeah.
Yep. Jean didn't want that gift. She said the smell of tequila made her want to throw up in her mouth.
Oh, wah, wah, wah.
Boring. None of the other women seemed interested in it either. They all kind of passed it around, smelling it, but just didn't drink it.
What the fuck's the point of smelling tequila? Like, it's not going to smell great.
Yeah, right. It's not going to entice you to have a drink.
Yeah, no kidding.
Just take it, God. So through the night, the women drank, they socialized, they watched football. There was a LSU versus Alabama game on. Through the night, Tamla was in and out of the house. Apparently, she was the only smoker there. At one point, it said Tamla was smoking some weed. I did read that another woman, Madeline, who is Jean's aunt, had joined her. However, not all sites mention it. So I'm not 100% sure how true that was, but it said Tamla did for sure.
Okay.
Regardless of who was smoking it, Jean had asked them to stop because her boyfriend Jose worked as a pretrial officer and he did not approve. So they did stop, respectfully. When the food was ready, The two men from the basement made their way up to join the party and eat. They ended up watching the football game together, and then the whole group played Cards Against Humanity. There's photos and videos that were captured during that game where Tamla looked like she was having a great time. She was smiling, laughing, in her cute pajama onesie, and all the other women looked pretty happy as well. At 10:30, Tamla had talked to her husband on FaceTime, and it seemed like she was having a pretty good time. Around 11:30, the women who were not spending the night had started to leave, and by 1:30, most of the guests settled in for a cozy night of rest. Jean and her boyfriend Jose decided they were also ready for bed, and this was the last time they would see Tamla alive. Based on everyone's story, the last to see Tamla still breathing was Bridget Fuller. She said Tamla had walked her to the door, given her a hug goodbye, where Bridget was picked up at 1:47 by her husband. She said Tamla was eating a bowl of gumbo and had planned to go out for one more smoke and then head to bed. Over the next 10 minutes, the home security system tells a very interesting story. It doesn't definitively give any answers.
But it's sketchy.
Oh, it's sketchy, Bev. Because at that point, everyone was in bed. So I'm going to break it down for you.
Okay.
1:39 a.m., the garage door opened.
That is before Tamla said goodbye to Bridget.
Yeah, just like 12 minutes.
Okay.
Or not even, 8. So, like you said, those were the only two that were up at that time. At 1:40, so just a minute later, the garage door closes.
Seems like somebody's coming home.
Yeah, like, that's what it seems like. 1:40, so that same minute, the garage door opens again, and it was left open for the night. At 1:47 a.m., the front door opens and closes, and this is when Bridget Fuller said she left.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Her husband was there to pick her up, and Bridget had said Tamla walked her to the door and gave her a hug goodbye and was heading for a smoke.
And finishing her gumbo.
Yeah. But Bridget's husband said she came to the door alone. Maybe he just didn't see.
Yeah, like, very plausible that he did not see Tamla.
But those are the statements made. At 1:49 a.m., the back door then opens.
Could be Tamla going for a smoke.
Yeah. And 1:50 a.m., it closes. So, like you said, that's when she's thought to go out for a smoke. A couple minutes later, at 1:57, the back door opens, but it remained open. And this is the same time the garage door is still open as well. So why would they remain open?
Yeah, it's super weird, right? Especially now we have Tamla outside, maybe some person in the garage, so you'd think there could have been an encounter, potentially. Not that I think there could have been, but there's a potential for that.
Exactly.
Based on the doors opened.
Yeah, and even based on Bridget's story, why would the garage door have been opened for any reason?
Yeah, like she said they were the only two left awake in the whole house.
Exactly. At 4:10 a.m., so quite a bit later, the front doors opened. This is supposedly when a lady named Marcy had left.
Okay.
Apparently she had to work in the morning, but not till a bit later. So this is when things get even more sketchy. The next morning, 8 a.m., Madeline, who, as we talked about, was Jean's aunt, wakes up, lays in bed for about 30 minutes, and around 8:45 a.m., she gets out of bed, heads to the kitchen to make coffee. In her interview with police, Madeline described seeing something horrific in the backyard. She said, "I saw a white dog print onesie. It was Tamla laying face down in the grass, not moving." Apparently, Madeline stopped, dropped to her knees to say a prayer. She then headed upstairs to tell Jean and Jose. She knocked on the door. No one answered. She thought she heard water running and thought, oh, Jean and Jose might be in the shower. So she went back downstairs to see if maybe Tamla had gotten up, if she moved. However, she was still laying in the exact same position. So again, Madeline went back up to Jean and Jose's room, didn't check on her for the second time. So she went back up to the room, knocked. Jean told her to come in. She'd woken them up. Madeline said she needed Jose because their friend from the island was laying face down in the backyard. Jean, Jose, and Madeline went back downstairs to look. Police were then called by Jean at 8:59 a.m. In the 911 call, Jean said they had a party and that one of the guests had fallen off the balcony. She didn't say her friend or Tamla, just one of them. Like, she knows exactly who she is. She then passed the phone to Jose. He stated that she's not breathing or moving, and she's stiff. He had apparently tried to bend her knee, but rigor had set in. He also brought attention to a small cut on her wrist. Jose said, "I don't know if this cut was self-inflicted."
Why are you trying to lead the emergency call operators to a conclusion?
Yeah. The operator asked if she was breathing, and Jose said, "I have no idea. I completely can't tell."
If you're that close to notice a scratch on her arm, you're close enough to fucking be able to tell if she's breathing.
I know. So, as we kind of discussed, this was just shortly after he told 911 that she already wasn't breathing. So, conflicting statements already. On top of everything, Bev, there is not a single moment in that 911 call that anyone attempted CPR, nor did the operator even tell them to.
Well, because they said she was fucking stiff and not breathing.
Exactly.
But still, that is kind of weird.
I would try everything if it was my friend. If I found someone dead in my backyard, I would literally, even if they were as rigored as can be, I would still try.
Yeah. You don't want to regret anything.
No, like, I mean, I get, if you're in the state of rigor mortis, there is no going back. But as just like a bystander finding someone in my backyard, that's the first thing I'm going to try and do. It seems absurd that it wasn't even talked about.
Yeah.
That's all.
It also seems weird that they wouldn't have, flipped her over at all, right? Wouldn't you, if I saw my friend, I would go and tap, and if they didn't move, I'd probably lift them and try and flip them over immediately, no?
Yeah.
See their face?
That is, the first thing. Well, and also because you can't do CPR when they're laying face down.
Yeah.
So, during the 911 call, Jose also said that it was about a 20-foot drop from if you're standing on the railing of their balcony. He mentioned that, kind of
creating a narrative, basically.
Again, yeah,
it's just
two separate ones, too.
Yeah.
He also said there was camera coverage of the whole balcony. He's quoted saying, "We will check them. It will catch the whole thing." The 911 operator never suggests to wait for the investigators or doesn't say, "Don't touch that."
Huh.
Just lets them, do whatever.
Sketchy.
At 9:07, the police arrived on scene, so they didn't take very long. In the morning, it was noted that there was still 80% of the bottle of tequila left as well. Tamla's purse and jacket were still sitting by the door. The police had asked all the party attendees to return to the house to get statements as well. When the guests returned, they were all put in one room. Jose, Jean, and Madeline were in another. And they were all just kind of left to do whatever.
Talk amongst themselves.
Yes, which is just a load of crap. We have a suspicious death, so let's get all of our witnesses to sit in one room together and potentially corroborate all of their stories. And maybe nothing sinister happened. Maybe that's true, but still, it's investigating 101.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Just saying. Everyone there did mention to investigators that although Tamla had been drinking, just like everyone else, she didn't seem blitzed. She was able to walk, talk, she still had her wits about her. Her husband has said the same thing when they were on FaceTime. Everyone mentioned over and over again that Tamla was the only smoker there. It was pretty
adamant about mentioning the fact that she was a smoker. Did they not like smokers? I don't know.
Which is kind of weird. Why is that? Why are they so hyper-focused on it? But literally everyone mentioned it. Almost everyone at some point told the investigators that Tamla wanted to leave in the early hours. It was mentioned in an interview that they had taken her keys and her phone so that she wouldn't drive drunk.
Okay, what?
I mean, taking keys from someone who's drunk and trying to drive?
Responsible.
Yeah. But also her phone, what's your motive?
Yeah, why would you take her phone? I would not want my phone taken from me, because if you are feeling like you want to leave a party and you can't, or someone's taking your keys, I would probably call my husband.
Yeah, call your husband to get for him to console you if you're upset, or be able to call a cab, an Uber, or just because it's yours.
Yeah.
What's the point, right?
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Mm-hmm. So going back to when the police arrived, they found Tamla laying face down, literally nose to the grass. Tamla's legs were extended behind her, with both feet pointing to the right. Her right arm was close to her body, with her palm facing the sky, and her left arm was found extended and bent at the elbow. What's interesting to note is that Jean, in her police interview, said both Tamla's hands were down by her side, palms up. She looked like she had done a faceplant, is what she said. That's the exact same position everyone said she was in who had found her.
Oh, with the hands down by the side?
Both. Yeah. Investigator Mike Christian examined the position that Tamla was found in the backyard, and was quoted, "Most notable when Tamla was turned over was the fact that she had come to rest face down. Her head had not been turned to one side or the other."
Yeah, weird.
Yeah, exactly. Implying that's a weird way to land if she had fallen that 14 to 20 feet.
The only way I could see it potentially happening is if she, like, blacked out and, like, fainted almost. You know, like, almost just, like, a full faint, not conscious at all, so didn't even think to catch herself. That's, like, I would say that would be the only way that I could reason her being completely nose down.
Yeah, like, and for some reason just not being able to control her body or brace her fall. So, apparently to the police, it would seem more plausible that she accidentally had tripped over a small gardening divider in the backyard and fell flat on her face and died. After all, the hedging, this little divider, looks like it could have caused the cuts on her shins.
Oh, okay, so it must have been like a foot tall or something because of your shins. Sorry, I thought it was just a hose, but it's like a divider, so it must be taller than like a foot.
It's only a couple inches.
It's only a couple.
Yeah, it's like one of those little yard
what?
dividers that separate like stone from grass.
Oh,
So it's not like even a small wall. It's literally just a divider to separate two different materials in the backyard.
interesting. I don't know how that would cause anything on your shins. That's kind of weird, but okay.
Maybe some scrapes, but like it doesn't seem like death worthy of a fall.
Yeah,
It's like
seems a little,
trip. You might bang your knees, but that's about it.
Yeah, a little sketchy.
So, because of this occurrence, when they actually went to notify Leander, Tamla's husband, that's the story they told him.
Who? The police?
Yeah. When they went to go notify Tamla Horsford's husband, Leander.
That she was dead.
Yeah.
They said she tripped
over this little divider that's only about 2 or 3 inches tall and died.
It just rings as weird that the police would give a reason for the death at all. You know?
Yeah, like
It's
without
weird.
talking to the medical examiner and doing an autopsy, right?
Yeah, you'd think you would just say your wife has passed, is no longer with us, or something happened, and she has been found dead.
They jumped to conclusions without really knowing. So when Leander heard this, he actually, obviously, like same as us, a little, well, not a little, very suspicious.
Yeah,
One,
I don't blame him.
Like, how can you trip over something so small and just die?
Yeah.
And not try to catch or brace yourself from falling. Like, it doesn't make sense. Even if you're, like, we've all probably fallen at least once when we're drunk, and like, usually you don't just fall face down. You turn your head, you put your arms up, like, there's something.
I'm sure a lot of people break their wrists from falling or tripping on something. I could see that.
But she just was nose down in the grass.
Hmm.
So, no surprise, Tamla was pronounced dead at the scene. Her body was sent for an autopsy, but before the autopsy report came back, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office began to work the theory that Tamla's death had been an accident. The case remained open for almost 4 months until the Georgia medical examiner provided their final report.
Oh, no.
Which included, Bev, the toxicology report, which tested positive for THC and noted her blood alcohol content at 0.238, just shy of 3 times the legal limit. She also had Xanax in her system. However, it was not metabolized yet, so she had taken it pretty close to her death. She also had blunt force trauma to her head, neck, torso, and extremities. Her neck was broken at C2, her wrist was dislocated, abrasions on her face, arms, and legs, 4 types of hemorrhages in her skull and brain, as well as laceration of the right ventricle of the heart, which is most common in motor vehicle accidents.
Holy shit.
Yeah. This lady, I don't know if she suffered, but like, there was a lot of damage. When the police learned the extent of Tamla's injuries, the idea that she had tripped over that little tiny divider and died was no longer possible. They were not consistent with a tiny fall like that.
No doubt. Jeez.
They realized she must have fallen from the balcony. Never suspected any foul play. Tamla's death. I know.
To have your neck broken and like blunt force trauma to what was it? The head, the torso, and the legs or arms?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, when you hear it, don't you feel like maybe she was beaten? Like, even like a dislocated wrist. When you initially had told me that, I thought someone might have grabbed, like, was holding her by the wrist and she was like pulling away. Because how do you, I know you can dislocate your wrist, but I don't know why that was the first thing I thought of. I don't know, Becky. It just seems a little sketch.
Yeah. So at that time, with the medical examiner's results there, her death was considered an accident. And on February 20th, 2019, just a couple months after her
4
death,
months, to be exact.
Case was closed. So it didn't sit well with Tamla's friends and family. Yeah. It was far too fishy, and just there was so many unanswered questions that how can you not be concerned with the outcome there?
No doubt.
Right. Now, here's a new name, Michelle Graves. It's one of Tamla's really good friends who was not at the party, as well as Tamla's family, would fight for a second investigation into her death. Even before the autopsy had come back, one thing that really piqued suspicion was Jose Barrera, so this is Jean's boyfriend, had been put on administrative leave for looking up Tamla's case, as well as there was a restraining order against Michelle because Michelle was very vocal about this case and that it is fishy. There is suspicion that it wasn't just an accident, and the request for a second investigation, but was denied.
I could see why she would at least try, because if someone was placing a lot of suspicion on me personally and I know I did nothing, it would upset me. So I could see how that's a little innocent, but Jose, you're using your position to do something illegal.
Yeah.
It's just wrong.
Yeah, that's a file that he shouldn't be looking at.
Yeah, it's totally inappropriate. It just seems weird that he would look into it and why he would even care, because most people that do that are the ones that have an invested interest in keeping themselves
out of the spotlight.
Right? He wants to make sure that like he's not a suspect, it almost seems like, with that.
However, you know, on the more innocent side, he could just be really curious.
Yeah, enough to like put your job at risk though seems unlikely.
A little questionable, yeah.
Just too questionable for my likings, Becky.
So to add to this, Bev, like I said, Jose was put on administrative leave. He was then fired on December 20th, just weeks after Tamla's death, for that incident.
So he was put on administrative leave, and then it was like ruled that actually no, we're going to fire you.
Yeah. So there are just so many inconsistencies, pure lack of integrity within the investigation. Also, there are some close relationships between the investigating parties that potentially impacted how the case was handled. First of all, Officer Mike Christian knew Jose Barrera because he was a court officer and they had crossed paths before. Sheriff Ron Freeman was pals with the deputy coroner, Chris Shelton. The sheriff had given Chris the deputy coroner job when he was elected sheriff because Chris had helped him with his sheriff campaign. And for those who don't know what a deputy coroner is, they are one of the persons responsible for responding to the traumatic or unexpected deaths. They work with law enforcement to interview people and establish a timeline of the incident. The sheriff giving Chris Shelton this deputy coroner job was absurd because Chris had been forced to resign from his previous job on a nearby police force for distributing pictures of himself posing with Mammy dolls. This is a problem because these Mammy dolls are a figure in our history of times of slavery.
Right.
And they represent Black women who would be domestic homemakers for white families. And this continued on even after slavery.
Yeah, absolutely. They were forced into those roles initially. And then even years later, they actually ended up being paid and hired into that role, but obviously paid at such a low wage. And it was still very discriminatory. You know, it wasn't like this position that was honorable. It was a position where they're serving white families. So
under the illusion that this is now a job because you get paid, but it was minuscule.
Right. So they were still suppressed in society and in the world. So yeah, even though it's a part of their history, it's a sad part of history. So it's super fucked up that he's taking pictures with mammy dolls. I mean, what does that really say about him, right?
Oh, for sure. And the fact that he's working with law enforcement and potentially has that bias or prejudice is just wrong.
Totally wrong.
And not to mention, as we talked about early on in this case, Cumming Georgia is predominantly white still and has a huge racial background. So to have someone in like law enforcement distribute those pictures,
it's not respectful at all.
Yeah, like he could have been thinking it was something just so innocent, look at these dolls, and maybe he didn't quite know the background of them. But either way, like,
it's just still fucked up. And then to top it all off, we know Tamla is a black woman at a white party, and he's the deputy coroner on her case. So it kind of gives us reason to think that the investigation wasn't handled in a respectful way or to give Tamla justice, because you're like, well, if he is racist against black women, potentially, then maybe he had reason to not handle this case well, or, you know,
look another way if something was a little fishy.
Yeah, like maybe it didn't matter to him as much.
Exactly.
Or to maybe give a timeline that benefited the white people that were at the party, as opposed to facts.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just sketchy.
Yeah, you know, someone coming back into law enforcement and helping with investigation who has that background and has been let go. I mean,
it kind of shows your cards a bit, right?
It does. And it's just like, why would you let someone have that job again when it could potentially impact not just this investigation, but who knows, maybe others too.
Yeah.
Right?
Not the best.
Not the greatest. So what we know is that Jose knows Mike Christian, who works with Sheriff Ron Freeman, who is also pals with Chris Shelton, the deputy coroner. It's said that Cumming is a close-knit community and they will look after their own. So is it so far-fetched that if something sketchy did happen in this case, that there could be any cover-up or anything hidden within that group of people?
No, it's not far-fetched. In fact, it like fuels the fire of having questions and doubt when it comes to this investigation.
It was noted that the scene was not preserved. Evidence was thrown out and not followed up with. There are limited crime scene photos. There wasn't much evidence collected from the rest of the house either. There was said to be 2 different kinds of smokes found on the balcony and 2 lighters. All the guests said that Tamla was the only smoker.
Yeah.
However, no smokes were collected. So there's zero DNA evidence. I mean, we'll never know if that other type of cigarette, maybe Tamla had 2 types of smokes and 2 lighters, like for whatever weird reason. But we'll never know if they were hers or someone else's.
Seems like pretty important considering she died like right off the deck where she was smoking.
And the fact that everyone was very adamant that she was the only smoker.
Yeah, it just seems super sketchy. And typically when you are a smoker, it's rare that you would like 2 types of cigarettes. Like a lot of smokers stick to their one type of smoke.
Yeah, they have a brand.
Like. They have a brand.
Yeah.
You could also, I mean, maybe they kept her purse for evidence. I'm not sure, but you would definitely be able to see if there was 1 pack of smoke in there or 2 or...
And this is why Michelle and Tamla's family is just so suspicious of the accidental death ruling. None of the phones from the party guests were checked. Not that detectives have any... They literally can't just go and be like, give me your phone.
Yeah.
I'm checking it. But...
They didn't even, like, look into it.
Yeah.
And that's what's upsetting, is you didn't do a proper investigation to even have cause to look at their phones. And that's what's a piss off, right? Because it's like, cover your bases. Like... Go through with it anyways, because if you find nothing, great. If it actually turns out to be an accident, great.
Like, super unfortunate.
If this woman was murdered, like, come on.
Yeah,
do your due diligence.
Exactly. It's not fair to the person that died to just have no answers, right?
Yeah, or her family. I can see why they were pissed.
I can too. And also because her death apparently wasn't considered even suspicious. The medical examiner didn't do a rape kit or check under Tamla's fingernails. Apparently, though, that is common practice with a non-suspicious death. However,
there was cause for suspicion. Come on.
Right? I can't understand if the medical examiner didn't know. Fair, right? Like they're probably only getting information.
Following protocol. No,
Right.
I get that. It's just a fucking bummer.
It's a bummer, hands down. What is a little fishy, there were no photos taken of the autopsy. That, regardless of the death or the manner, that is not common.
That's not common.
It's unheard of, in fact. I don't know. As soon as you hear that, my alarm bells just start going off at this point. Who made that decision to not take any photos and why? Mm-hmm. It serves no one to not do that.
Yeah.
Regardless of how they died. It almost sounds like someone had requested.
Yeah.
You know?
And it kind of plays into that theory or idea that we had earlier where it's like, it's such a close-knit community. It'd be easier to ask a favor from a friend than just some professional who is doing their job.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have more trust there.
Even just having like that pure trust in someone in that line of duty is just, it's, even if that was the like thing that happened, it just seems like, why would you not do your full job? Dr. Shaker, a forensic pathologist, examined Tamla's body after the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. So there was a second examination. What he found was the right wrist had actually a compound fracture. That's an open wound.
Wasn't just dislocated.
Not just dislocated. And so like with an open wound, hence what Jose said when he said there was a cut.
That makes sense. Okay.
However, there was very little blood found at the scene. There was just a little bit of blood on the left sleeve of Tamla's pajamas. The lack of blood suggested to Dr. Shaker and Tamla's father that this injury was post-mortem.
Ooh.
In the crime scene photo, you can actually see the bone sticking out. So like to say, oh, there's just a tiny little cut, like seems a little bit of like an understatement.
But it also kind of actually gives more... No, I was thinking maybe if it was done post-mortem, this theory that I'm about to say doesn't make sense, but it does kind of give more credibility to her falling. Solely because if she did try and catch herself, like a compound fracture would make a lot more sense than just a dislocation.
However, how did her arms end up the way they did, if that's the case, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Shaker also found there was no spine fracture, and the absence of bruising from her head trauma made him a little suspicious that she had died from falling almost 2 stories.
Right. Like, the amount of head trauma she did have, you would think that there would definitely be bruising.
Yeah. Now, Bev, with that, there's obviously inconsistencies in regards to the examination of her body.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about the inconsistencies in some of the statements made. We're going to look at Madeline's, who, as we all remember, is Jean's aunt.
Who was living with them.
Yes.
Right.
The statement that she gave to the police, first of all, a couple weird things, is her statement is actually done at Jean's house.
That's so weird.
Like, what? Why? So it's done at Jean's house, and it happens to be the day of Tamla's funeral.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like it would make more sense that the statement was taken at Jean's house if it was the day of.
Yeah.
Not like days, weeks later. Like,
exactly.
You'd normally get called into the police headquarters.
Yeah, they come down, take your official statement, probably have a little camera on the wall recording what you say for like legit purposes.
That's fucked up.
It's weird. So, in all fairness, Madeline's actual interview, what she said, isn't all that crazy itself. She pretty much says the exact same thing that she told him in the first place, like the day of. The weird thing is that in the middle of the recording, Jean walks in to the interview and says, and these are quotes, "I'm going to start charging y'all rent." Officer Christian says, "Get out of my head." Don't know what that means, but he said it. Then Jean says, "Look what I just went and got. Y'all gift cards." Then I was told I shouldn't because it will look bad before the case is closed. Then she says, "It's very typical because I figure all the cops like Dunkin' Donuts." Officer Christian says, "Do you have something?" Jean says, "Do you need me or can I get ready for this funeral?" The officer says, "Go do your thing." Jean, perfect.
Super casual.
Yeah, super casual bribe. No big deal.
No, but not even just the bribe, just the interaction.
Yeah.
Weird.
So this interview pretty much ends after that interaction. But who just busts in on an interview? Hence why it should have been done down at the police station. So when I kind of saw that, I almost thought, and maybe I'm just like super suspicious about all criminals and all interviews, and I read into things way too much, but I couldn't help thinking that Jean was coming in to being like, checking on Madeline, being like,
are
don't
you
say
saying
anything.
Some shit? Like,
yeah, exactly.
maybe.
Like, stick to the story, auntie.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, like,
I could be wrong.
You could be reading into some shit there, but still, like, I don't understand why anyone was in the house or why they didn't do it at like the police headquarters.
Yeah, it was just so informal.
By the way, I love when I say police headquarters. It sounds so epic. Police headquarters.
I just imagine you getting arrested and be like, "Oh, you're taking me down to police headquarters."
Why do you imagine me getting arrested?
I don't actually. I just imagine the statement being correlated. Because when else would you say police headquarters? Renowned.
Like, I don't know, truthfully.
It sounds prestigious, but it's not. Also, to be noted, within that interview, Bev, when Jean was talking about the Dunkin' Donuts and gift cards, Madeline also kind of slipped in that she had made them muffins.
What?
But that was the only time you heard of it. Like, nothing else really came of it. It just kind of was looked over.
So we could say that Cummings is a really close-knit community.
Yep.
You know, the
nice
officers.
Georgia town.
Yeah, and, like, this was common practice. It could be. We don't know. We're not from Georgia, Cummings. You know, maybe. It could be innocent.
Could be.
But to the average Joe listening and hearing this shit, comes across as, like, they're bribing the shit out of these officers.
That's right. And, you know, if I was an officer, just saying, one, I would just never accept bribes. It is against my morals.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was, I need a hell of a lot more than some Dunkin' Donuts shit.
Yeah, and muffins.
Yeah, like, that's all it's going to take?
Yeah, no, it would probably take more. That's why I'm like, it could be totally innocent. So weird, little sketch, but
could be harmless.
Okay,
on to Jean's interview. This is kind of where it gets a little more suspicious.
Let's hear it, Becky.
Okay, Jean's interview with Detective Mike Christian. So same officer. If you didn't think there was something going on with all those, I say quote bribes, or not, you might think there is now. For a couple of reasons. Jean actually contradicts her aunt's version of what happened. Her behavior and how she's talking to the police, it's just not normal. It's almost like Jean is sitting there with a really good friend.
Yeah, casual.
Yeah, being all flirty, chummy with them. Jean initially told investigators that she saw Tamla last up at 1 a.m. and that Tamla had asked her to stay up with her because she doesn't get to hang out with the girls very often and she'd like to continue the party. But in Jean's second interview, she said she last saw Tamla at 1 a.m. and that she was actually going to bed after one more smoke. Jean said her aunt always goes outside first thing in the morning to check the weather. That morning, she said Madeline had actually seen Tamla when she went outside. She then came inside, washed her face, said a prayer, as she thought she was just seeing things, then went back outside to check, and then proceeded to go upstairs and knock on the door to wake up Jean and Jose. According to what Jean had first said, her and Jose got woken up by Madeline, so she wouldn't know that happened. So she could, you can say it in a statement, but it's not, you don't know that that's what happened because you apparently were asleep.
Yeah, like your statement should start when you were woken up.
Exactly. After Madeline woke up Jean and Jose, she said to the couple, "I need Jose." So he got dressed, went downstairs with Madeline. He then yelled up to Jean, "Get your phone, call 911. And as she went downstairs and then outside into the backyard, she said she stayed standing on the gravel and handed Jose the phone because 911 was on the line. But as we know, Jean had actually spoken to 911 before Jose. Jean was talking to the operator. She said, "We had a party, we were drinking, and they fell off the balcony." So maybe she was just mistaken, this is a couple days later. But either way, it's not what happened. She also said that Jose touched Tamla's back and she said, "Don't touch her." And he responded with, "We have to, she's not breathing." Then he proceeded to touch her leg and it had rigor mortis already. He said, "She's gone." And again, that's not what Jose said. He actually said, "I'm not completely sure." And we know this because of the 911 phone call. These statements were done not immediately after, so maybe it's just her memory failing her, or she's kind of just filling in blanks. You know, it's traumatizing. You don't always remember everything exactly how it happened, right?
Right, no, that's fair.
So Officer Christian had asked John, "Do you remember her arms being by her side?" And this is when she had made the comment, "Yes, they were by her side like she face planted." Officer Christian asked John, "Was Tam the only one who smoked weed?" John said, "Yeah, she was the only one." And I quote, "But if you're getting me on record, when you talk to other people, Diane or whatever, when she spoke with Paula, this was not said to me. So just so you follow up, she asked Paula, 'Do you know if she did coke or anything else?' Paula said, 'Not that I know of. I don't even know what she was aware that she even did that.'"
And what?
Just to be clear, Bev, those are not my words. I did not write that. That is word for word a quote from Jean in that interview. So you can see, one, she's kind of like implying maybe Tamla did other stuff besides weed, but had no real proof of it. And also, that lady did not make much sense there. But I think we can get the gist that she's kind of implying that
Tamla did harder drugs than just weed.
yeah, but no one really knows if she did, so she's kind of just bringing it up for who knows what reason.
Yeah, it's like hearsay. It's kind of just bullshit.
Exactly.
Fucking bullshit.
Fucking bullshit. To that, Officer Christian says, "Okay." And then John responded, "So that's the only mention I heard of it. But to be honest, that made my head think of oftentimes I find things will make my head think because, well, she drank that much tequila, and that's a depressant. And pot are a depressant. But if you did that, you could drink tequila and still be..." She always had that much energy, so I never thought anything of it. Officer Christian says, "Yeah." So, to be clear, any implication that Tamla did harder drugs, drank a lot, anything like that, had uppers, downers, it's all just rumors. There is zero facts that Tamla did any of that.
Okay.
So, again, why is Jean mentioning this?
Yeah.
Maybe to taint Tamla, make her look a little more like druggy. On top of it, in the autopsy, there was no coke in her system. So the questions weren't even leading into coke or anything like that. So I just don't know why she went on about this.
Yeah. It just seems like a character assassination, to be quite honest.
100%.
Not very nice.
Yeah, it's like she wants to taint her credibility.
Yeah.
But to be clear, Tamla was an amazing mom. She took good care of her children. She was a responsible family woman.
So, bullshit.
Yeah. So remember, not long ago, in Madeline's interview, Jean had walked in, said, "Hey, I got these gift cards from Dunkin' Donuts." Well, in Jean's interview, the police now are addressing this. And they quote, Officer Christian, quotes, "Jean, of course, we are here to talk about the incident that took place Saturday and Sunday morning with your friend Tam. Let's address one thing real quick. You came into the room when we were talking to Madeline, and we appreciate the fact that you're going to get us gift cards, but we cannot accept them, and it would just make them look weird if we did."
Yeah. I'm glad they addressed it.
To that, Jean says, "I understand what you are saying." That's all she says. This whole interview just is incredible. Jean sounds like she's flirting with the officers. It's definitely not the vibe you would expect to see in any professional investigation.
Yeah.
It's truly just weird. Also, it feels odd that the police, like we said, are addressing the gift cards right now and not when it happened. All right, we're going to get into Jose Barrera's interview and all of its inconsistencies. To be clear, there are 3 different scenarios as to when he saw Tamla last. Initially, Jose said he saw Tamla last at 1 a.m. and she was waiting for a ride or staying up until the morning until she could leave, which is a little consistent because we know previously Tamla did want to leave.
Right. So it's the first kind of mention of that so far.
Yes. Then he later said he saw Tamla last at 1:30 and that she was going out for a cigarette and then to bed on the couch or in one of their children's rooms. And yet again, he changed the statement and he said he last saw Tamla at 1 a.m. and that she was going for a smoke and then to bed. So first it was 1, then 1:30, and then 1.
And like all different things she was doing.
Exactly.
That is weird.
Yeah. Like, get your story straight, guy.
Yeah, no doubt.
Jose had also given 2 different statements in regards to the morning when they found Tamla. First was that him and John had been woken up the next morning by Madeline and had proceeded to go downstairs to check on Tamla. The other statement he gave is that he had woken up and started cleaning up after the party and had found a cigarette and a lighter on the balcony, and because of his OCD, he had picked it up and put it on the fire pit. So 2 very different statements.
It's also weird that he would highlight the cigarette thing. It's also kind of sketch that he added that detail willingly without being asked. Mostly because it's like, are you trying to create a plausible explanation as to why your DNA might potentially be at the last place Tamla was thought to be alive?
Oh.
Yeah, it's like, it's just kind of odd. It's like, well, we now know there were 2 cigarettes out there. We kind of mentioned how weird it was that Tamla was said to be the only one smoking, but yet there was 2 different brands of smokes out there. So it's like, maybe it was Jose. Like, who knows, right? And maybe he's trying to create this narrative that, oh, my DNA's found on there because I moved it in the morning. Not because I was out there having a smoke late at night with Tamla.
Totally.
Kind of weird. It's just, maybe my brain is like, just way too
sinister.
But, I mean, it's just weird that he adds that comment.
It is weird, especially when you lump it all with the other things he's said.
Yeah.
Like, it just gives you a little tidbit to be like, why did you say that?
Why did you say that? Like,
yeah.
Oh, you just have OCD? That's why you moved it? That's the reason?
How convenient.
Yeah, how convenient.
Your DNA is now on there because of your OCD.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Which is also a bust and a bummer because it didn't even get tested. So it's like,
we will literally never know if my theory is correct here.
Yeah, exactly. Was it on the mouthpiece or what? Was it just around the edges? Like, if you were to actually see a smoke pick it up,
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
where was his DNA found? Was he lying? Was he creating a story? Was he being sketch, or does he just, the poor man, have OCD?
Exactly. Like, we just don't know. And this is the problem with this whole friggin' case. This is the theme. We'll never know. Officer Christian obviously had to ask him about Tamla's body position and how it was found. Officer Christian is quoted saying or asking, "Someone moved her arm because you told me previously her arms were by her side." Jose says, "Correct, Officer Christian. Do you know who moved her arms?" And Jose said, "I have no clue. When I was on the phone with 911 and I checked, I had gone back inside the house and I stayed on the phone with them until Corey Miller got there, one of the supervisor law enforcement agents. And I walked him through the house and out the back door and showed him what we saw. He told me to stay upstairs on the back deck, and that was the last time I ever saw her." So that's the extent of Jose's interview. We're going to now talk about Bridget Fuller's interview. Her interview is just bonkers. She sounds all scattered all over the place. I don't know. It's weird to hear. Anyways, she goes on about being the mother hen and how she's always keeping her faculties about her when having drinks, and that was apparently something that Tamla really liked about her. So Bridget, remember, saw Tamla last at 1:47. Like you said, her husband had picked her up. In Bridget's interview, her and the officer chatted actually about how she would keep a Xanax with her at all times in a necklace. The officer asked if she had given any to Tamla, and she said no. But remember, Tamla had Xanax in her system during the autopsy. However, it was not metabolized at that point.
Yeah. So it would almost make sense that if Tamla died shortly after Bridget left, that before Bridget left, she gave Tamla a Xanax. Like, that would make sense, but she's saying she didn't give it to her, so kind of weird.
It is weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was found out later that Bridget had actually given Stacy, who planned the party, Xanax a couple of times. They actually had found texts from Stacy asking for more. So both of those two women were not upfront about this. So back to the Xanax thing, it is plausible that I think Bridget could have given Tamla Xanax.
Yeah, maybe she just doesn't want to be known with the authorities as providing Xanax to people.
Right.
Okay, that does make sense. So maybe she actually did give it to Tamla, and she just doesn't want to say anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, yeah, I guess it would be illegal.
Yeah.
Technically, so I can see why she'd be hiding that fact. So Bridget is just a character. Her whole interview is so scattered, and at one point, she actually came up with one of the only negative comments about that night in regards to Tamla, and that was that so Bridget had been sitting on the edge of the couch with her laptop, working apparently.
At a party?
At a party, yes.
All right,
you gotta
do what you gotta do.
That's right. The hustle's real. But at one point, Tamla actually came up to her, straddled her, and then grabbed her boobs.
Oh.
In Bridget's interview, she kind of portrayed that she thought at that point, she realized, oh, this lady has no personal boundaries. She also went on to say that she's not good with new people, and Tamla was new to this group.
Oh.
So I could imagine if I was Bridget and I'm taking exactly what she's saying word for word and as the factual truth, that maybe she was very uncomfortable with how Tamla was behaving. So as you can see in Bridget's interview, it's so fragmented and just like kind of, it's just weird. Mm-hmm. But there are a couple really interesting things that again make you just kind of question what exactly happened that night. It doesn't give us any more answers. It makes everything more confusing. It adds to the complexity. In 2020, Tamla's case was kind of reignited. As we know, it was closed prematurely, I think. But it was reignited during George Floyd's anti-police brutality protests. Because of Tamla's death, and it's spreading so rapidly across the internet, celebrities like T.I. and 50 Cent and, as we mentioned, Kim K., brought light to this case. There was a petition to have this case reopened, and it reached over 700,000 signatures. So there is a good amount of investment and awareness being brought to this case. June 5th, 2020, Ralph Fernandez, who is the Horsford's family attorney, wrote a letter to the family claiming his team had investigated the details of Tamla's death and they have concluded it a homicide. Witness statements are conflicting in regards to if the body was handled or who handled the body, as well as evidence was thrown out and it wasn't followed up with. The scene was not preserved, as well as all the autopsy issues and the conflicting findings. All of this prevented a definitive answer as to what happened to Tamla. This letter was not only given to the Horsford family, but it was given to journalists in Atlanta, and it was published a few days later.
Of course, it's juicy AF.
Yeah, it is. Shortly after that, the sheriff had sent a letter to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. So on June 18th, 2020, it was reopened. But about a year later, the case was closed with the exact same conclusion.
Well, it's so unfortunate because, in order to come to a different conclusion, you would need that evidence that wasn't well preserved, and you would have needed the investigation to be done properly. Mm-hmm. So without any of that, it's kind of hard to come to a different conclusion definitively, which is and that's why I'm sure it's such a piss off for everyone involved. And for us listeners here, when we hear the facts of the case and all the sketchiness surrounding it, it's like, fuck, you just wish it was done right.
Exactly. Like, regardless of what happened that night, mm-hmm. if the investigation was done properly and thoroughly, and all potential evidence and leads and autopsy for that matter was all followed up with correctly and done properly, mm-hmm. there might be a different outcome. There might not. But at least you'd be able to have the questions you have answered.
Yeah, and a little bit more closure. Because as of right now, even the conclusion of the case is so sketchy that it's just hard to feel like justice was served at all.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Bev, you heard all the other facts, but here are some of the other sketchy honorable mentionables in this case. There are photos, like screenshots.
Yeah.
Of all the logged videos of the cameras from Jean and Jose's house, suspiciously, there are no videos on the day or the days surrounding the incident, but literally every other day is accounted for. Yes, could there have been like malfunction of the cameras? It's possible. Like, weird things do happen. However, with all the other sketchy shit happening,
it's way too coincidental.
Way too
what the
coincidental,
fuck?
Yeah. And I think that missing just kind of makes you really think that there was a crime committed, because why else would it be not there?
Yeah, everything else works fine. Before, after, all the rest, it's like, no, nah.
Yeah. So on top of that, what makes that last point way more suspicious than it already is that there is a picture of an email to Officer Christian from Jean, and she's being, again, super chummy, calling the officer by his first name, and it says, "Here's your Dunkin' Donut gift card from Jean." And in this email, Jean is quoted to say, "So weird, I must have deleted the video from that day. I'm not tech savvy, so I don't know if we can get it back. But here's my password and username for the account."
It's weird that she would offer the Dunkin' Donuts at the same time as saying that.
Again, with the Dunkin' Donuts, like, it's convenient timing to give someone a gift, but not be able to produce that evidence.
Yeah, it's just Again, just too coincidental that you would pair you being like, oh, key evidence is not. It's just not there.
It's not there.
Here's some Dunkin' Donuts. Shh.
Hush, hush. Exactly.
Yeah.
So the next weird thing has to do with rigor mortis. Rigor mortis appears approximately 2 hours after death. It starts in the muscles of the face. It progresses to the limbs over the next few hours. Rigor mortis is completed between 6 to 8 hours after death. It then stays, though, for another about 12 hours and then disappears. Now, being out in the cold, it's said that rigor mortis could be delayed by up to 3 hours. On the night that Tamla Horsford died, it was not warm out. In fact, her family was surprised that she was found outside without a jacket, as she hates the cold. She would have never and has never gone out for a smoke without her jacket. Now, Bridget was said to have been the last person to have seen Tamla alive at 1:47 a.m. And we know that Tamla was found at about 8:45 a.m. by Madeline. Based on that timeline, that would fall right into the normal phase of rigor mortis. But take into account that it was cold that night, we're looking at rigor mortis being delayed, and that could push back Tamla's time of death by 2 or 3 hours. So that might bring us to around 10:45 or 11:45. Now remember, all the other guests had described finding Tamla face down with both arms by her side, with her palms up. But the police had found her one arm by her side palm up, and then the other extended and bent at the elbow. Based on what Jose had said about her being stiff, it seems weird that someone would have been able to have bent the elbow.
Right, so she would have been found, they should have all gave the statements that her arm was extended and above her head.
Exactly.
Because if she was in rigor mortis, they would not have been able to move her.
Yeah, and
like he said.
Exactly, and if they had, there would have been some major damage within that joint that they would have been able to see during the autopsy.
Right, but if the rigor mortis had been delayed by 3 hours because she was in the cold, they would have been able to move her arm.
Exactly, therefore making the timeline not quite plausible.
Yeah, it will at least calls it into question for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So in no way are we implying that anyone specific is responsible for Tamla's death. I do think this terrible investigation just leaves it, like, it was so poorly done that it just leaves so many unanswered questions for friends and family and quite frankly now the public. So I think this is a very suspicious death.
100% I agree.
Exactly.
It's very not satisfying. You don't listen to it and you're like, yes, justice was served. You're listening and you're like, oh, this is all fucked up.
Yeah. It's like you hear one kind of stupid thing that they did, and then you hear the next and you're like angry. And then you just get to a point where you're like, of course there was no video.
Yeah.
Of course she wasn't in rigor mortis, or there was a question about that. Of course her body was moved.
Yeah.
You know, of course evidence was thrown out. You know, it just gets so ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? This is a goddamn shoddy investigation.
Goddamn shoddy investigation is right, Beth. So All we can say is that hopefully one day there is justice for Tamla and her family, or at the very least, questions answered. However, there is another petition that you can go and sign at change.org to reopen the case. Have an outside group of investigators look at it to see if there can actually be more answers found than was already.
So if you want justice for Tamla, visit change.org.
That's right. Otherwise, Bev, we'll leave that as food for thought. Hopefully there's justice. And that's it for today.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for listening.